When most people picture the air battle over Western Europe in World War II, they imagine the clash of fighters in the skies, the epic duels between Allied airmen and the Luftwaffe. But beyond the fighter duels, another battle raged in the skies, one often overlooked: the constant struggle between Allied bombers and Germany's Flak units. As the Luftwaffe's fighter defenses crumbled under relentless Allied pressure, the burden of protecting Germany's skies shifted squarely onto the Flak forces. Their contribution was immense, their presence constant, and for bomber crews, their fire was often more feared than enemy fighters. Manned by over 1 million soldiers and auxiliaries, men and women alike, these guns were responsible for more than half of all Allied aircraft lost over Europe. Today, we'll explore how Germany built and organized its formidable Flak defenses, how it evolved through the war, and how successful it truly was in shielding its cities from Allied bombers. From the early months of the war, the Luftwaffe recognized a growing reality. Germany and its occupied territories would need a powerful shield against the rising tide of Allied bombers. The answer was a massive expansion of the anti-aircraft artillery arm. By its peak, more than 1 million personnel served in the Flak forces, supported by an arsenal of over 9,000 heavy guns, 30,000 light guns, and 15,000 heavy searchlights. This network, officially known as the Flak Artillery, or simply Flak, was part of the Luftwaffe and under the control of the Air Ministry. The Luftwaffe's chief oversaw the air defense of Germany and critical areas of occupied Europe through a structure of territorial air districts and special defense commands. These commands combined aviation assets, heavy and light Flak batteries, searchlights, barrage balloons, and the all-important aircraft warning service. To counter the Allied bombing offensive, Germany built a vast and integrated air defense network, combining both air and ground elements. Towering concrete Flak towers, some over 100 feet high, allowed heavy guns to fire over rooftops and blanket the skies. Streets were camouflaged, and even entire fake towns were constructed to mislead bomber crews. At the heart of this system was a network of radar stations, warning centers, and coordination posts that detected incoming formations, directed searchlights, and alerted thousands of gunners and civilian defense teams. Every raid was met with a carefully orchestrated wall of fire. Within each air district, Flak forces were organized into groups and then subdivided into smaller subgroups. These units operated sector control centers, headquarters that coordinated fire, maintained communications, and served as the link between radar warning networks, Flak batteries, and fighter interceptor units. Operational formations varied depending on mission requirements. A regiment could consist entirely of gun battalions, be made up solely of searchlight units, or combine both in mixed formations. This flexibility allowed the German Flak system to adapt to local threats and integrate seamlessly into the broader air defense network. A typical heavy Flak battery fielded 4 to 6 heavy guns, most often the iconic 88mm, backed by a pair of 20mm cannons for close-in protection. Light Flak batteries generally deployed around a dozen 20mm or 37mm guns, ideal for engaging low-flying aircraft. Static batteries were mounted on permanent emplacements, often with crew quarters attached, and ranged in caliber from light 20mm weapons to massive 150mm guns. Lighter and medium caliber pieces were sometimes installed on rooftops of factories and key buildings to cover urban targets. Some static positions were built into imposing concrete towers. In Berlin, 3 100-foot-high Flak towers dominated the skyline, each with a 250-square-foot roof platform mounting 4 heavy anti-aircraft guns. Other guns were mounted on railway cars, allowing rapid redeployment to meet shifting threats. Mobility was central to German doctrine. Positions changed frequently to counter Allied tactics and confuse bomber crews. Mobile batteries could occupy one site today, only to vanish and reappear miles away the next night. In heavily defended zones, heavy guns were usually placed on the outskirts, covering likely approach routes, while light flak clustered around high-value targets like docks, rail yards, and factories. Light batteries were also hidden along rivers, canals, and major roads to ambush low-flying fighter bombers. Every deployment reflected a balance of firepower, mobility, and deception, designed to keep the enemy guessing and the skies deadly. The Flakwaffe's first shield against Allied bombers lay far from Germany's heartland, in the gun batteries that lined the coasts of the Netherlands and the Low Countries. The airspace over the Netherlands soon earned a nickname, the Bomber Autobahn, a direct route into the Reich that bristled with anti-aircraft fire. Determined to exploit every chance to hit incoming formations, the Luftwaffe established a powerful flak belt along the Belgian and Dutch coastlines in 1942. Supporting this network were the Kriegsmarine's own anti-aircraft batteries, tasked with defending harbors and vital naval assets. Often overlooked in the larger air war, these marine flak units were frequently the first to engage incoming bomber formations. By war's peak, 23 heavy marine flak batteries stood along the Dutch coast alone. For Allied crews about to cross the shoreline, the welcome was always the same. Lancaster rear gunner warrant officer Harry Irons of No. 9 Squadron remembered it vividly. The flak on the Dutch coast was murderous. Light flak from hundreds of guns. From a distance, it looked like 20 fireworks nights all at once, with purples, blues, yellows, all different colors. It was a warning to every bomber crew. They hadn't even reached Germany yet, and already the gauntlet had begun. German flak crews employed several fire control methods for heavy anti-aircraft guns, adapting to conditions where targets might not be visible, or when engaging multiple aircraft was more effective than focusing on just one. These methods included direct fire on sighted targets, predicted concentrations based on radar or observer data, and fixed barrages. Guns could fire individually or unleash coordinated salvos, sometimes with as many as 32 guns firing at once. In the early war years, fixed barrages were a common tactic. Controlled from a central operations room, these could be shaped into screens, boxes, cylinders, or deep belts of fire. They were often placed over key target zones or just outside the estimated bomb release point, especially at night or in poor visibility, to disrupt bomber runs and force errors in targeting. Light and medium flak, highly mobile and quick to react, engaged targets the moment they entered range. Relying on high rates of fire, these guns were deadly accurate below 1,500 feet, though performance dropped sharply at extremely low altitudes due to limited tracking time and the speed of the target across the gun's field of view. Crews adjusted fire using tracer rounds, and in some cases, guns were positioned near heavy searchlights to gain quick range and bearing data on incoming aircraft. German air defenses deployed thousands of searchlights, not only to illuminate bombers, but to dazzle and confuse their crews. The main types were 60cm and 150cm parabolic reflectors, often arranged in belts of 10 to 30 lights, spaced 1,000 to 2,000 yards apart. Heavy searchlights were usually guided initially by sound locators, while lighter units scanned in patterns until they found a target. Once locked on, the glare could make accurate bombing nearly impossible, while also allowing night fighters to close in unseen. Tactics shifted with the weather. On cloudy nights, searchlights swept along the cloud base to silhouette bombers. In fog or haze, they aimed low to create glowing pools that hid landmarks. And on clear nights, belts of lights formed radiant walls that drove bombers lower into the sights of fighters and flak. To further shield vital targets, German defenses often turned to barrage balloons. Suspended by thick steel cables, these balloons created an unpredictable web in the sky, forcing enemy aircraft to fly higher, where bombing became far less accurate. They were deployed in irregular belts, about 5/8 of a mile wide, and positioned roughly 1.5 miles from the outer edge of the target area, with 200 to 800 yards between each balloon. Heights varied throughout the day and with the weather, but typically hovered between 6,000 and 8,000 feet, though some reached an imposing 11,000 to 12,000 feet. Late in the war, smaller, low-altitude balloons were introduced to counterattacks under 4,500 feet. These airborne obstacles worked hand-in-hand with anti-aircraft guns, with flak batteries covering any gaps in the balloon shield, ensuring no bomber approached unchallenged. The responsibility for aircraft warning rested with the Luftwaffe. While part of the Air Signal Service, the Aircraft Warning Service functioned as a distinct branch dedicated to monitoring German airspace. Its network formed a web of air guard stations and regional headquarters, with stations spaced roughly 20 to 45 miles apart. Each station's task was to report the number, type, altitude, direction, and when possible the identity of any aircraft passing over its sector. These observations were sent to central filtering and evaluation centers, which then relayed the processed information to both civil and military authorities. Detection relied on a combination of visual observation and electronic equipment, including long-range radar sites positioned along the European coastline for early warning, and both long and short-range sets deployed in inland areas to supplement coverage. As Germany's war demands grew, large numbers of anti-aircraft personnel were reassigned to ground combat units. This reduction was offset by the use of railway-mounted anti-aircraft batteries, which could be moved quickly to reinforce threatened areas on short notice. Another measure was the creation of home defense units, which replaced regular anti-aircraft crews with factory and office workers, as well as boys aged 16 and 17, ensuring that air defenses remained active despite the manpower shortage. Before and during the war, both the RAF and U.S. Air Force misjudged the impact of flak, underestimating not only its ability to destroy aircraft, but also the way it could disrupt bombing accuracy. On the other side, Hitler and Göring placed far too much faith in it, making the Flak-Waffe the centerpiece of Germany's air defense strategy against heavy bombers. Critics have long argued that the vast manpower and resources devoted to heavy flak could have been better spent elsewhere, reinforcing the Eastern Front or resisting the Allied push after D-Day. Yet, by the later stages of the war, the Flak-Waffe was stretched thin, fighting a two-front battle, as many Luftwaffe-manned flak units were pulled into direct ground combat. Even so, flak exacted a severe price. It downed thousands of Allied aircraft and destroyed countless tanks and vehicles, bolstering Germany's defense wherever it could. But in the face of overwhelming Allied numbers, its ranks and weapons were steadily eroded, with no hope of replacement. For bomber crews, flak was a constant and deadly presence, one that could rip apart aircraft in seconds. On its own, it could not halt the bombing campaign, but without it, Germany's cities and industries would have been reduced to rubble far earlier in the war.